Well, I guess the role of a journalist has changed over time in that it's now much more about being able to feed different platforms. So, for example, when I started in radio, all we had to worry about was doing stories for radio bulletins. Now, every radio station has its own website, every news operation has its own website, News Hub operates on TV, radio, online, so you're going to have journalists who, in theory, should be able to deliver a story for all those platforms. And each platform is different, so a story that might work really well on radio won't necessarily work well on online, and it won't necessarily work well on television. So each platform has different needs, but you want the same journalist to be able to deliver across all platforms. So journalists nowadays need to have a multitude of skills that we simply didn't need 20 years ago.
Start your move 6, ready 1. Mike, cue.
Kia ora, good evening. Auckland Council has announced a widespread campaign to deal with dangerous dogs, especially American pit bulls. There'll be a 10-week amnesty for the owners of menacing dogs.
I became a journalist in 1986, I think it was, but I started with Radio New Zealand in 1984, and so I joined as a cadet. Previous to that, at high school, I'd looked at maybe being a lawyer. In fact, I'd won a scholarship to go and do law, but I had a brief taste of what it was like to be a journalist, and it really did get into me, and so that's what I wanted to do from then on, was to be a journalist. Well, I'm very lucky. You know, it's a real privilege to read the 6 o'clock news. It's the sort of pinnacle or flagship news program that we have at TV3, and I've done that now for 11 years. But I'm also a journalist, and that's the thing that I love the most. It's the thing that I am passionate about, and over the years I've been able to go around the country and around the world telling the biggest stories and meeting people, and and sometimes hopefully making a difference. Edna is 16th on the waiting list, so given the circumstances, that's pretty good. It does make you wonder, though, about the children that couldn't make it to the hospital. How many of them are trapped in those sorts of camps that we've just been to? In some ways it's changed a lot, in other ways it hasn't. One of the things that I love about TV3 is that it has this amazing culture, and you heard that when you were working at other places about this incredible culture at TV3, and it's still here. Things have changed a lot, particularly in the last 2 years. I think we've had more change than the last 20 in the television industry, with new media and the move to digital, that kind of thing. It's been just incredible, the pace of change. But the basics of what we do, reporting and telling people's stories, is still the same. And the importance and the privilege of doing that is still the same.
Now to our guests. It's the Kiwi company which is driving on the ground social change through documentary making. Our guests are Hu-Jing Wong and Dean Easterbrook from Borderless Productions in Auckland. Their latest film, called On the Backs of Women, offers a window into the lives of three.
The format of the show has undergone some evolution, but the biggest change really is the advent of digital technology. There are changes in the way we do things, there are changes in the access we have to people. I mean, it may be difficult for school students of today to understand that when we first started, the computers were dinosaurs. When we think back, if the computers broke down, we'd have to haul out a typewriter and hand type the stories, and if they were going into the Wellington network, we'd have to fax them. So there've been huge changes in technology. Also, when I started, there was no such thing as email, so it wouldn't be that you could just flick off an email to someone and ask them if they would do an interview. It would be a much longer process, and looking back, I don't know how we ever filled everything that we did, but we just did it differently. And now also, although I work for Radio New Zealand and I produce a radio show, we've got to be much more mindful now of the digital aspect of the job, which is writing for a website, which is sourcing pictures, it could be sourcing YouTube video, things that will brighten up our website and make it more attractive to look at rather than just listen to. So we're now not only writing for the air, but we're also having to source information that is visual as well.
Well, we've basically gone from being a TV-centric news operation, and that was inherent in the name 3 News, to a brand. So Newshub is the brand, and the brand lives separately to whatever platform it's on. So, for example, 3 News was always identified incorrectly towards the end of its time as being simply a 6 o'clock news show, when in actual fact it was also on digital. There were evening show, late night news shows, there was the midday news, there was the First Line as it was back then. What we did was we decided to take all the various news brands that the company was operating, and that included Radio Live News, for example, and turn them into one brand and have that brand across all our platforms. And what that does is it means that you know Newshub as the brand rather than the product, and that's the key thing. The brand can live anywhere. So if some new way of telling journalism pops up, we can just slap the Newshub brand on that rather than come up with something specific to that platform. So it's very much developing a brand rather than a product.
I think the hard part now is the media is so much more fragmented, and there have been mergers, very much so in recent times. The newsrooms are shrinking, the way we do things is different. I don't know that there are as many opportunities for just sound news journalists. The way that the industry has changed is there's much more going out on social media. So there's been a consolidation of staff, and that is continuing. So I don't actually think that there are as many jobs there, because technology is also replacing some of what people in broadcasting or newspapers do. So I would say overall there are fewer jobs now.
Take advantage of the fact that now you can tell a story on so many different platforms and learn as many skills as you can. I think visual storytelling is going to be really important. So you need to be able to shoot, edit, do your own sound, all that sort of thing. And just look at embracing the fact that the industry is in an intense period of change, and use that to your advantage. You know, when I always tell journalists who come to me a little bit worried about the changing nature of the industry, you know what, out of great chaos and that sort of thing and restructuring come great opportunities for people. And I think the important thing is to look for the opportunities and grab them when you can.